So, good afternoon. So, tomorrow, the 5th of June, is a special day in the Buddhist calendar. It commemorates the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and parinirvana. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, didn't we already do that last month? So, you're right, your good memory. We did observe such a day last month, but that was according to the Chinese lunar calendar. And it's called Wesak Day, which is celebrated in many Southeast Asian countries. But the Tibetan lunar calendar isn't exactly the same as the Chinese one, and sometimes the date for this day comes 1 month later. So tomorrow is that day according to the Tibetan calendar, and it's known as Sakadawa. And it's said that any merit we create on this day is multiplied 100 million times. So it's a good opportunity to make special effort to do virtuous, beneficial activities, and at least try to avoid doing non-virtuous things. Here at the Abbey, we'll be taking the 8 Mahayana precepts. Some people will be doing a Nyungne, which is a special 2-day retreat that focuses on Shenrezig. Some of us have other things to do, so not everybody in the community will be doing that. But we will have our bi-monthly ceremony to purify and renew our vows, our nuns' vows. And in the evening, there will be a Dharma teaching. So we'll have lots of opportunities here to create merit. And a few days ago, thinking about Sakadawa coming up, I thought it might be helpful to try to imagine what the Buddha would do and say in this difficult situation we find ourselves in our country right now. So for the past 1 week or so, first we saw a terrible murder of an unarmed black man in Minneapolis at the hands of the police who were supposed to be protecting life. And then in response to that, thousands or maybe millions of people have taken to the streets, not just here in America, but all over the world, to protest the conditions that gave rise to that murder and many others like that. Most of the protests have been peaceful, but sadly, some people have acted violently, harming the police, harming other people, looting, burning, and so on. And I could see in my own mind, there were times when there were feelings of sadness and worry and even some despair. So I thought, just for my own sake, it could be helpful to think of the Buddha and what he might say. If he was interviewed by CNN or the BBC and they're asking, Buddha, please, what do you have to say about this situation? Do you have any advice for us? So I realize that this might be presumptuous. I'm not a Buddha, and I can't be sure what the Buddha would do or say. So I do apologize if anyone thinks that this is disrespectful. But I do feel that what I'm saying is based on things that the Buddha did say and do in his life. So it's quite possible he did those things back then, and he might do similar things now. So first of all, I'm sure he would feel deeply and fully compassionate for George Floyd, his family, friends, and all the other people who have been hurt and who felt hurt by this incident and other similar incidents. Because Buddhism values the life of every living being, and the very first precept we take when we start following the Buddhist path is to refrain from killing. I'm also certain that the Buddha would not feel the slightest hatred or anger towards those who are responsible for that murder. He would have compassion for them, understanding that this act came about through many causes and conditions that stretch back in time and spread in many different areas. And especially ignorance, the main cause of all negative actions and all suffering in Buddhism is said to be ignorance. One type of ignorance is ignorance of karma, where we just don't know what kind of results will come from our actions. For example, killing. Killing actually leads to suffering, not only for others, but also for oneself. So if we don't want to suffer, then we should avoid such acts. And also a deeper form of ignorance is of the true nature of all things. emptiness of inherent existence. That's a tough one. But anyway, Buddhism says underlying all negative actions and all confusion and all suffering and problems is that ignorance. But fortunately, it can be cleared up. And also the Buddha understands that everyone, even those who act harmfully, have the potential to transform themselves and even reach awakening, enlightenment. In other words, everyone has Buddha nature. Nobody is permanently bad and doomed to forever suffer and engage in negativities. So during the Buddha's life, both he and also his followers were sometimes victim of criticism and even harmful actions. And there were even attempts on the Buddha's own life. But he never responded to these events with anger. Instead, he only felt love and compassion towards the attackers and the detractors and reached out to help them. He also showed compassion towards those who committed acts of violence towards others. For example, Angulimala was probably one of the worst serial killers who ever lived, because he single-handedly murdered 999 people before becoming a disciple of the Buddha. And he even attained complete liberation under the Buddha's guidance. So the Buddha only showed kindness, love, compassion, and wishing to help those who did harmful things. So I'm sure he would do that today as well. But at the same time, I'm sure the Buddha would not agree with the acts of violence that have been carried out by some protesters and would probably try to intervene and get them to stop. Because there was once a time when his own clan, the Shakya clan, was about to go to war with their neighbors, the Kolyan clan. And the Buddha went there and spoke to them and was able to get them to realize that human life is much more important, much more valuable than water and land, which is what they were going to war about. And he got them to lay down their arms and stop this war. But I'm also pretty sure that the Buddha would advise us to look at our own minds using mindfulness and introspection and check to see if there's any disturbing emotions running around in there. For example, we might feel anger or hatred towards those who are perpetuating or encouraging harmful actions. Or we might feel anxiety or despair that the situation seems inherently hopeless and it's going to be like that permanently forever. And then the Buddha would offer advice on how we can change our minds, solutions, methods, tools that we can use to counteract these mental afflictions so that our minds can be restored to a state that's calm, compassionate, and positive. He would also probably recommend that we meditate on things like the nature of samsara, cyclic existence, this world that we are in, not just this planet Earth, but unenlightened existence, is unsatisfactory and generate the aspiration to be free from this, impermanence, karma, and of course bodhicitta, the aspiration to free not only ourselves but everyone else from this problematic, unsatisfactory situation. And the Buddha would probably also recommend changing things in society to bring an end to injustice and racism. Some of his disciples were kings and princes, and I'm not sure, but my guess is he did give them advice on how they could rule on the basis of ethics, compassion, equanimity, and wisdom, and so on and so forth. So as Venerable Jampa mentioned yesterday in her talk, the Buddha denounced the caste system, which was so unjust and caused so much suffering. So there were many people who were actually slaves in that system, and they were treated quite badly. And he accepted everyone, no matter what caste they came from, into his Sangha and erased the caste system among that community. In fact, some of his chief disciples were originally from the lower castes. And in his teachings, he recommended that human beings should be assessed by their deeds, virtuous and non-virtuous deeds, rather than what kind of caste or family they were born into. So he emphasized ethics and morality rather than this kind of caste system. And by the way, yesterday we were watching a really wonderful online town hall meeting called Reimagining Policing with President Obama, his Attorney General Eric Holder, and a number of young activists who are involved in various projects like My Brother's Keeper and Color of Change. So these people have been working for years to bring about such changes and are dedicated to continuing to do so. So I think we all found it really inspiring. And they brought up a number of very concrete and constructive actions we can all start to do to bring about positive changes. And I can't help but feel that the Buddha would agree with what came up yesterday and would support them, congratulate them. So if you didn't watch that, I think it's probably still available on the Obama Foundation website, obama.org. So to conclude, you might try this exercise yourself. Just think about the Buddha and what he might say and do during these tumultuous times. And maybe even talk to him in your mind, in your heart. Really ask him for advice on how you can manage this situation, how you can manage your mind, and what you can do to bring about constructive changes in the world. And tomorrow, do your best to create some merit, some virtue. You can go on the Abbey website and find some recommended practices to do. But even if you don't have much time or ability, even just to recite a few mantras, Buddha's mantra or Chenrezig's mantra, or even just rejoicing in what other people are doing, that's also a way of creating virtue. So I wish that you all will have a virtuous and meaningful Sakadawa. Thank you.